Well, howdy, folks. Today is Monday, June 9th, and this is our weekly iteration of the Security Collab, the OpenJS Security Collab Space weekly meeting. So, to hop into the agenda for today, we do folks have any walk-on items or things they would like to bring to the group and put on the agenda before I hop into my agenda? Oh, okay, cool beans. So, for me, the only item I have is a review of the version 2.0, a preview version of the version 2.0 security compliance guide. Um, there's been a number of changes. I discussed the inherent structure of it last week. Plus, we've had some other small discussions before that. Um, there was a call for feedback in the document itself, but I haven't really seen much in there. So I thought it might be better for us just to kind of walk through it as a group and get some live feedback and thoughts here. And whenever we don't cover, hopefully people are up to speed enough where it's not too time consuming for them to jump in and provide some asynchronous feedback as well. So if that sounds good, I am going to share my
Actually, Red, if
screen.
I added
Go
a
ahead.
before we do the work session on 2.0, I had added a bunch of stuff to the agenda.
Oh,
I
go ahead.
just wanted to do some status updates and understand where we are in a couple things. Um, so I don't know if you've got the agenda open.
Yep. Oh, I see. Yeah, so update on the CNA. I'm just waiting. I've given the uh Red Hat folks what they need. But I have not heard back from them at all yet again. So I'll email them again this week to see what's going on.
You know,
Since I
maybe
haven't
maybe I'll just reply all and ask. It seems like they just needed the new URL. Would you think that would be helpful? It's
um
the Pedro thread.
yeah, I can follow up again to
Okay.
see what they say, but I appreciate that, Robin. Let's see. So the services.md proposal and NPM continuity policy, those are going to get, I'm just going to incorporate your feedback, Ben, and then we can bring it to the TSC meeting um, tomorrow, if that's fine.
Oh, do you mean the CPC?
Not TSC, CPC. I don't even know where I got TSC from.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's good. Let's make sure that they have the right tag to be on that agenda for tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'm always in that meeting. Well, whenever assuming I don't have a conflict. And then Rudd, do you have that meeting on your calendar already?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if anyone else from the working group wants to attend that meeting tomorrow, and you don't have it, it's on the public calendar. But if you want like a formal invite for that one, let me know. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have other folks from the working group that have provided feedback on those two documents to give opinions in that meeting. So let me know.
Cool beans. Thanks, Ben. And yes, I'll bring back the latest there and we can see where we're going. But your feedback was well noted, Ben, and I don't think it'll be too challenging to incorporate an update. Cool. Let's see what else is on there.
Oh, one thing about the CNA I wanted to go back to was documentation and kind of like a run book for what to do.
Hmm.
And I know we discussed that a little bit, and I think that work can probably happen in parallel with the while we're waiting on the official launch.
Yeah,
And Ruddy, you mentioned you had some stuff already. You just needed to sort of organize it and publish it, right, to GitHub.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, that's a pretty much, I think, nearly done task at this point. The internal processes themselves are pretty straightforward. It's more getting access to once it launches, getting access to an API token so we can start building out the process itself for how we publish. Robin.
Yeah, I also recommend a town hall meeting. That seems to be the most effective way to reach all of our maintainers. Been having a great turnout when we have new programs. So once that documentation's done, let's do a town hall and just walk people through it.
Which kind of town? We did
Where we do the
host.
internal, like we did with the ESP program. I think we did it for what was the other recent security issue? But I feel like whenever we want to reach our maintainers and inform them of a new program, that's been the best way.
Yeah, we did advertise a lot of different town hall like open house conversations before. Is this different?
This is just do a one time. I think when you created several, it created less urgency for people to attend. So I recommend we do it one time,
Okay.
the documentation, and then provide the recording. So,
All right, sounds good.
mhm.
I will take that action then.
Okay.
All right. Um, let's see what else is there. Okay, that looks good. So, cool. Jumping into the compliance guide then. Let me share my screen. Here's the link. For folks who want to follow along in the document itself. So, um, before we jump into the specific proposed changes and questions, I wanted to just give a quick refresh again visually on the new kind of structure that I've been working through on in the compliance guide to help organize it better and make it a little bit more accessible. Also, being able to add more specific information to it without making the whole list too long. So now within the compliance guide, this is something Ulysses initially introduced as this idea of an ID slug to describe exactly what to provide a very simple just tag for the title and entry of the guideline. I was trying crazy ideas and IDs and things like that, and that didn't work out so well. So this is kind of the unique this slug ID is the unique entry name for each entry. What are the things that we ran into when starting to add things around about other tools beside GitHub, like with npm, is that a lot of the feedback, a lot of the items were actually really duplicative for each tool. So there'd be guidance to say turn on MFA in at the org level in GitHub, but there's also turn on MFA at the org level in NPM, and the instructions and documentation for how to do those things and the nuances of configuring those things are quite different, even though they're effectively the same task. And the documentation that comes with the guideline usually is specific to the tool itself. So what this new structure does instead is it allows us to create a higher level item and some hierarchy in within a type of guideline. So, for example, I'll use MFA for example. So in this case, the top level slug for um, using MFA is just Devin for MFA, and this has a generic description for using MFA across all development tools. And then under that is use a hardware key, which is a generic recommendation we have to use pass keys or a security key. But again, that is a generic recommendation across all development tools. And then finally, we have the bottom level one here, which is so use a hardware key in GitHub. use a hardware key in GitHub non-interactively, and use a hardware key in NPM. And so the idea is that at the top level there, we'd be able to create a hierarchy. We'd be able to create a hierarchy where folks can traverse through these items. And so we can have more items at the bottom level specific to individual tools. You can imagine this as a web page where there is a list of top level items on the left side and like a column on the left. And then for each of those top level items, if you click onto it, you can then see what those sub items are within that. And then further down, you can see the specific guidance for each tool below that, rather than having them all as top level citizens like they were before. Any thoughts on that? If I didn't do a great job explaining it, let me know. I'm happy to walk through it.
Yeah, I think any type of hierarchy that we can add to the long list is going to be helpful. So I am supportive of creating that.
Cool beans. Does this system, as I described, make decent sense to folks? I'm more than welcome to hear feedback on this and being able to adjust it. Oh, okay. Alrighty. So then with that first idea in mind, and I haven't completely finished cleaning these up. There's a few different methodologies I was trying out here. And I'm gonna, after filling out the whole thing and going through it,
I'm
I'm gonna
sorry, my
normalize on
mute
one.
button was far away. And I'm
Oh,
a
it's
little
all
bit
good.
new to this particular document, so forgive me if I'm asking an obvious question, but what are the commitments that maintainers are making for compliance? Like you look at sort of fix CVEs by 90 days, fix CVEs by 30 days. Is it a recommendation or is it a, hey, look, your project, things will happen to your project if you don't do these things?
Yeah, this right now the table's kind of out of order while it's kind of being worked on. In these columns here, you can see the expectations for either incubating projects, archive projects, active projects, or archive projects in the foundation itself. And so the easy way of reading this is E is expected, R is recommended, NA is not applicable, and D is deferrable. In other words, they don't have to do it now, but they have to do it in the future. Deferables are usually with incubating projects that aren't fully online yet. So it's something they can do later.
We don't have anything mandated though, which is something we had discussed. Like the only thing we really mandate our projects is to have governance and code of conduct and post the privacy
It's exactly kind of what I
issues.
was thinking. I
Yeah.
was like, hey, look, if you want to graduate from incubating to active, do you now have to do this? Like, it's a lot of work to remediate level. That's what I do every day. So for folks who don't know me, I used to be on the board. I now am a principal engineer at ChainGuard, where we rebuild NPM libraries from source to remediate CVEs. It's a very, very hard problem to do. And so some of those like active projects want to become active to get the people that can help them do that. And so I just wanted to kind of understand how that might play into a review of going from, incubating to active. Is there been any discussion on that before?
Yes, there has. I think um, I think one of the interesting challenges we've had with this compliance guide here is that we wanted to keep it really, as much as it's not small, we wanted to keep it at least focused on the top things that folks can do to protect their projects. And so there's been efforts to have a prioritized list, which I wound up taking out based on feedback. There were efforts to try to identify easy deferments for incubating projects, but frankly, there's not a ton at the moment. So
Okay, that makes sense.
these,
I
oh,
guess
go
I was
ahead.
just reading it closely because it is a big table. Thank you for putting it
Mm.
together. It's a lot of work to get to this point. So I'm not trying to torpedo anything. I think
Oh
it's
no.
rows 71 and 72. The expectation and recommendation feel a little out of order. Maybe I'm crazy. Like the expectation is if you are going to, it's recommended that you patch exploitable non-critical vulnerabilities within 60 days. Sorry, it's recommended to do that, which feels like it would be the stronger risk. And then it's expected that non-critical vulnerabilities are patched in 90 days. So yeah, maybe they're both, maybe that's a mistake, or I don't know if folks know the logic behind that one.
Yeah, I think some of these, well, this is a great call out. And this is exactly the purpose of this meeting. So we can absolutely go through these and adjust them. This one wasn't on the table initially, but yeah, if you see stuff, let's talk about it.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
in this one, what are your thoughts on this? Like with a
Probably both
fresh set of eyes.
recommendations. I mean, there's a lot of places where you can't necessarily remediate easily, and especially if the group had come to consensus around exploitable non-critical within 60 days being a recommendation, then the 90 days keeping it as a recommendation feels reasonable. And again, they're non-critical. So like this is probably like Sev 2, Sev 3, your Sev zeros, I don't know if that's in there somewhere else. I missed them. Yeah, so all those are also recommendations. I think that one probably should just stick as recommendation.
So this one right here, you mean row
Yeah, both
71?
those would just be ours too. And I had missed that column before when I brought up this question. So I think that answers my original question of would this be a consideration in going from incubating to active? Because if they're both recommendations, then the state is the same at both levels. So projects wouldn't necessarily have to bend over backwards on remediation. Not saying that things shouldn't be secure, but sometimes, especially in node land, there's a lot of REDOS level remediations. I think, Robin, you put it well in your talk of important vulnerabilities versus things that can be described as don't punch yourself in the face and you'll be fine.
Well, that sounds great. What we can do if right now this list is, so what we have is recommendations. We have a few different levels of recommendations for folks. So we have like exploitable high criticals within 14 days, criticals within 30 days. Um, and
Yeah, the
then,
levels all make sense. It's just that one
yeah.
that was an expectation that seemed a little bit out of order because it
Oh,
should
I
be
see.
getting done. Like there's
Hmm.
no debate on my mind that, hey, look, if there was all the time in the world, like we all want to remediate all of our vulnerabilities. But sometimes there are competing priorities that put especially things like a REDOS vector for a library that never gets run on the public internet, not really a huge risk. Like technically it's a risk, but if you never get a lot of requests in the first place, then how could you get REDOS? So that would be my suggestion, is just to make that row 71 also a recommendation.
How do folks feel about that? Any other thoughts?
I'm wondering if you were looking to simplify it, not even it wouldn't simplify it. It would probably make it more complicated now that I think about it. But if you were to remove all of the vulnerability recommendation timeline items and instead publish an SLA for vulnerability recommendation and just say you're expected to follow or recommended to follow this SLA, you could get rid of like a bunch of these requirements and just refer to a different thing.
Oh, I see. So like basically, kind of like how there's one entry for the security MD having to meet
Exactly.
the policy
Yeah.
requirements
Yeah,
to
exactly.
have it in that kind of document and then
Because we're
move it
talking
over there.
probably 6 to 8 items here fall
Hmm.
into this category. Whereas you could, I mean, if we're looking to do that, and I mean, I could say for my company, what we do is we just have our vulnerability SLA guidelines, and that's what teams are expected to follow.
Yeah.
It's not like we have, and then we measure based on those guidelines, obviously, but the rule is refer to the chart.
All right. Actually, I'm a big fan of that, Steve. Ben, Robin, it sounds like that would result in creating some sort of recommendation, like policy document, kind of like we have with NPM or um, uh, or a continuity guide, and we would reference that. It doesn't have to be as like official policy, like CPC approved as that, but it would be in that form of a document. That sounds good for folks, then I can transition to that instead. I think it's actually a good
I
idea.
mean, I feel like it gets to Charlie's point about then you can put the caveats in that policy versus people looking at this and going, well, this doesn't affect me on this project because of the XYZ and that kind of thing. It's just I don't know, just my suggestion. But I'm also of the opinion we want to get something out there. And so maybe that's a refinement we do later too.
The suggestion you're making, Steve, is very easy to make.
Okay.
So I don't think it's actually that that much of a lift to get that done.
Yeah, I also want to publish this for the broader JavaScript community, not just our projects. So,
Okay.
so we can create a communications plan around that as well. But yeah.
Encapsulation makes sense. I mean, you're stepping outside OpenJS for a second. With Friday's announcement around WordPress, there's a second package manager related entity in the umbrella. I think it's the first language level thing that has its own package manager outside of Node. Maybe I'm wrong. Been a lot of growth in the LF ecosystem since I was active, but you could, if you start to encapsulate here, you could maybe it graduates into the OpenSSF and just becomes like the thing that if there's package management, this is what you do. So +1.
I think that's all for those. Do, do, do. Okay, cool. Okay, just back. All right, cool. Okie dokie. All right, good call out. Good chat. All righty. Anything else folks have?
Right,
All righty.
if sorry, I was gonna just ask if say Charlie was gonna review this document in depth. I think Charlie, you mentioned this is kind of the first time you're seeing it. What's the best way for him to, or anyone else, to provide feedback on it? Is it comments in the doc? Is it something else?
Yeah, I was gonna what I was gonna do after this was basically create a mock-up where to show people how they can add comments in, and that's basically just gonna be to add a column with your name and put in comments you have in that way, so we can all kind of see what everybody has to say transparently. And I'll mock that up and put like the little thing in the thing for it after the meeting.
Sounds good. Yeah, I had a chance to read it. I just was reading for content this time because I heard CPC at the beginning of this meeting. So I would say I've given it a scan, but I hadn't really dug through at this depth.
Cool. So there's actually some very specific ones I'd like to make sure we cover today for discussion as a group that I think we could have some healthy discussion on. So to hop into it, first one is we have an item for freestanding applications specifically that they should include a package lock JSON with each release. And the intention of this, as we recall at the time, was to allow other applications to understand what dependencies were involved with the building of the application by the actual application builders. I had some feedback from Ulysses that this was very prescriptive and specific. And I was wondering if there were, so I wanted to open up the floor to ideas for alternative ways of doing this, or broadening the idea a bit to not just this, but also other ones. Chris.
Help me understand. You said that it would include a package lock file for each release, you said, correct?
In releases, yes.
When you say like, what do you mean?
Well, that's the thing with this one. I think this one was a little imprecise at the time, so we could go through and like articulate it better.
Right. Well,
Chris,
so
I might be able to
what I'm
answer
getting at,
because like
what I'm getting at,
NPM. Oh, God, I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead. I was just trying to help.
what I'm getting at is that the package lock file does not get distributed.
Right.
So
What I was just about to say.
anything that's like, oh, with the release, like it's not really with the release. And then you get into like, if you're gonna otherwise, I don't know, in a GitHub releases page or something, say, here was the package lock file. Like you end up, potentially dealing with concurrency issues, and then that makes it basically completely pointless. So if it's not like that, then like what is the shape of that? And I guess you did say it was sort of vague, or I forget the terms you used, Rudd, but anyway, Charlie has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just about to chime in on that. And then there's multiple package managers with multiple lock files, and all of them ignore them, just like NPM does. I was just about to say what Steve put in the chat. Like, are we really talking about SBOMs here? Because that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, this was an alternative to SBOMs, I believe, because SBOMs themselves had a lot of pushback at the time, and also because of the challenges with SBOMs and specifically with NPM packages that we've gone through. So didn't want to have an SBOM specifically, but some other JavaScript way. The reason this was written away was so that we're using more JavaScripty way of capturing dependencies. Steve.
I'm wondering if it's just enough to have it checked in to the GitHub location, because you can always reference the tag that it was built from and see the package lock that's checked in. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter where it was published, right?
I think this is where this is maybe a phrasing issue, because yes, I wasn't expecting it to be in the release itself, of course, but
Yeah,
instead in
okay.
the
I
repo.
think we're hung
It's
up on
really
release here.
hard to do that though, Steve. Like that's been I started about 3 months ago, like finding source coordinates for packages. Like there were a lot of breaks in the package managers that
I got you.
very
Yeah.
very
I
early
see what
on,
you're
like
saying.
if there's a .git directory, npm will look for the git commit, and will put the full SHA in a property that was internal to the package called git head, lowercase git, uppercase h. pnpm yarn broke that regularly. npm broke it for like 2 years. So there's all of these packages out
Gotcha.
there that have no git head with them, and I just searched this document for it, and like ensuring that some sort of source coordinate information that has a lock file seems to satisfy this, like not quite an SBOM, because SBOMs are a little bit
Yeah.
like they're a little bit loosey goosey right now. Let's just call it what it is. Like good idea, lots of potential there, but the pseudo standards have not gathered. And then from there, once you have source coordinates, it's pretty easy to figure out what you wanted to install, but that hasn't been consistently implemented by the package managers.
Chris.
Yeah, I guess I have a more fundamental question about what is the purpose of this? What thing is this solving? Who would be interested in this?
I can give you a basic one. So npm calculates integrity SHA sums from the artifacts. So if you get man in the middle when you're trying to install something and you get injection, you'll detect it. Like that's it, the most basic sort of like what the threat vector is. Outside of that, I don't see a lot of value personally.
So should we remove this then?
Seems like it. I don't know, maybe if there's any sort of question remaining about it, we could create an issue to discuss what the intent behind having this was, and what thing it's trying to solve, and we can just, further discuss options and whether they meet the goals.
Cool. I'll take an action item then to create an issue on this one so we can discuss a little bit more. I think I would love to this is I think one that has I was expecting to have a good debate around it, so I can
Most developers are committing these to source control anyway. They just get removed from the like distributable thing. And so if you have strong source coordinate information in the package, then this is a non-issue. And I was scanning this doc. I didn't see anything about including that in the published content. And that might be the thing that this gets replaced with.
Well,
I see.
something to keep in mind though is that most of the OpenJS Foundation projects, and I actually struggle to think of one that this would not apply to, but most of them are libraries and they would not have the package lock file committed.
Yeah, this is specifically for freestanding applications.
Okay, got it. That's useful context.
Cool beans. This is a good discussion. Let's move on to the next one. Just as an we don't have to discuss this one in the meeting. It's more for review later, and I can organize that. Had some feedback around this item around disabling self-hosted runners in GitHub orgs, potentially because it's too restrictive, and some teams do use self-hosted runners, and it is infeasible to achieve this. I think Node.js was an example where this was not feasible. I wanted to get folks' thoughts on whether or not this should be softened or maybe scoped to not include large, like native code development pipelines and products like Node. Charlie.
I can't speak for Node, but some of the like ARM compatibility with runners, like, and getting all your build matrices, like GitHub runners can do a lot of that now. There is risk there, but self-hosted runners introduce another set of supply chain risks that are still there. Right now, you have to know who's maintaining the build servers, those types of things. So I would say the verdict is kind of out on which one is more secure. Because on the GitHub side, you have a set of folks who are maintaining those for you, looking at security. There's a security team. If you start self-hosting, well, now that's you. So you're taking on that responsibility, but are you better funded than GitHub to do that function? I don't know if that's always going to be true.
Being a security dude my whole career, I would say anything cloud-based and centrally managed from a bare metal IT perspective is always going to be safer than a few people getting together on the internet and hosting stuff.
We used to host ARM builds in Rod's garage in Australia. You know, like that was fine. But like, I don't know if we still want to do that.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just on the note about like, are you better funded? Like, I mean, just because Microsoft has whatever, money that and revenues and whatever that they have doesn't mean that they're directing those funds to it's completely opaque to us.
Totally.
Who's actually tasked with maintaining that stuff.
Absolutely. And that's why the verdict's sort of out. Like, it's not saying one is better than the other. Like, I couldn't really tell you.
So does this need more discussion?
I think it's generally accepted as like a guideline to not use self-hosted runners. I think that's perfectly fine. And I think just like anything, if a particular project has a a compelling need to do so, I'm sure they're not taking on that extra burden and work for no reason. And I think this is fine.
I wonder if there's a qualifier here that this should only really apply to those products that don't have that are just really JavaScript only projects and don't have other complexities like maybe NVM or Node.js does. So is there a way to limit this to say like, okay, projects like that are not meant to be in scope for this, and this is like meant for like the 90% case for the foundation?
Yeah, I don't know that you need to qualify it, especially without knowing that who actually has the use case for that.
Mm,
But that's just
okay.
my opinion. Not like not
Alright.
don't feel strongly about it.
All right. This was another one that came up as being kind of maybe too restrictive, especially in smaller projects. But we already have the qualifier here for multiple contributors, which is preventing admins from bypassing branch protection settings. So obviously, admins can go just change the setting whenever they want. Um, so they can disable this, then re-enable, do what they want to do, and then re-enable it, which is kind of where the criticism from this originally landed. So in larger projects with many contributors, um, maybe this control did make sense. Chris.
Strong feeling that this should always be not allowed, that admins can't bypass. And you're correct that there is an escape valve for administrators to go and change this setting. We were actually just talking about this in the Express project last week, and the thing that convinced everybody beyond shadow of a doubt of why you should always have this on is because in the GitHub UI, in order to bypass, like to merge a PR, for example, you have to deliberately click a checkbox that says, I am bypassing these, whatever, required reviews, whatever it may be. So you click a checkbox, there's a big red button. So you're very deliberately like know what you're doing. That's fine. And that would be a reason to not necessarily require this. But the issue is that when you're at the command line, there's no such protection. So I cannot tell you how many times somebody has done a git push and accidentally pushed to protected branch instead of what they really wanted to do, which was to push to a new branch and create a PR. And at the command line, it doesn't stop you from doing any of these things because you're an admin. There's no, hey, are you sure this is protected? It just says, yep, we're going to let you do it. And it said, and after the operation is complete, it says, oh, by the way, you bypass the branch protections, and that's why you were able to do it. Same thing with force push. So it should always be on. In a case where there does need to be an override, yes, the admin should go in, change the setting temporarily, do what they needed to do, and then turn the setting back on. And that will prevent a lot of avoidable issues.
Alrighty. Sounds like all right. Awesome sauce. Let's go next, which is the pinning actions to full length commit SHAs. So Express did a really good report on this. There's a fantastic analysis on the rationale behind why it doesn't make sense to, as a blanket rule, to say that you should pin all of your GitHub actions with commit SHAs. However, after that discussion, there was a follow-up to that report. I believe it was mentioned that potentially this could be scoped down to specifically being about actions that have access to secrets. Thoughts on that? Especially, I think, Chris, because you were involved in the original report.
Yeah, so I just pasted the link to the Express decision for reference for anybody interested. I mean, ultimately the decision was that if the action doesn't have access to sensitive things like secrets or is doing things like publishing artifacts, then the risk is extremely low, even if a action gets compromised, right? As long as you also are setting the correct workflow permissions to only what the thing needs, usually like a read or whatever. And then you should just use semantic version tags by default. So like at v4, whatever the thing is. But yeah, for things that access secrets, publish artifacts, etc., you know, we don't prescribe in Express. We just say maintainers may choose to do that. We're still not completely convinced that the trade-off is like a complete no-brainer.
Any other feelings on this? So I put a note in about expanding this to include actions that can publish also.
I mean, I can see an attack vector for someone who knows that somebody's using a semantic versioned action, putting something in for secrets management, forcing the upgrade, grabbing the secret. Anyway, potentially. I don't know. It seems like an all or nothing to me. But I come from regulated industry. We're all or nothing on some of these things. So
Okay, I will. How about this? How about there is commentary in that discussion. I'll follow up in that one around in the context of the guideline for some next steps in discussion there. And I'll put a link into that. Yeah, wasn't there was an issue where you guys were discussing this, right?
You talking about Express?
Yeah.
Well, not anymore. There was the PR for the thing that I linked where we were discussing it.
Oh, okay.
But that
Got it.
everything's been resolved, and that what I referenced was the sort of final
Okay.
decision. But again, it leaves things open to accepting the reality that it's always a trade-off. There's no clear win. It's about which risks you want to accept that you think are greater or lesser than the others. And you just have to make a decision and stick with it. There is also acknowledging that if you are going to pin commit hashes, that when you get like updates for them, like, oh, dependent bot suggesting a thing, like they have to be manually reviewed. They have to be specifically signed off on by somebody that actually reviewed the changes associated with that commit hash. Because as we know, the GitHub refuses to fix things like the malicious fork, you know, commit hashes that they won't protect against.
One where actions got compromised. That's just from like a couple of days ago. So yeah, it really is where the I'll put out things that people can parse from AI from this video, but the folks who maintain ecosystem GitHub actions certainly do have a lot of power, put it that way. So yeah, looking after actions, making sure that this is a place where maybe the foundation, like the LF, would look at like, hey, look, like step security releases hardened runners for all of these actions. What are the actions that we want to offer that capability to for some of our projects? Because if you're not maintaining your action yourself, even if it's a third, yeah, okay, GitHub, some of the other ones, big boys, big girls, maybe it's okay, but like if it's some person you don't know well, you might not want to use that action.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. I'll create an issue for this so we can discuss further. Looking forward to seeing how the discussion goes in there. Let me bring us to, in the time we have left, I want to prioritize. Let's see. These recent activity requirements and limiting of the number of users who are admins in GitHub and NPM, and how active they have been in the last year. There was Ulysses brought up that these are very prescriptive in how long they are, which was the intent when they were written. But maybe these time periods are not universally appropriate. Like there isn't a good one rule to rule them all on this one. And he was wondering whether or not it'd be more effective to just require like an annual review of these things and for specific decisions to be made each time that review's done instead of explicitly saying this must be done. I know this is kind of like a sensitive topic as well because old maintainers who have a lot of knowledge tend to hang on and pay attention and show up sometimes, and they would need to keep that access, which goes against this rule of like the last 12 months. So I'm looking forward to hearing your folks' thoughts on that. Chris.
Yeah. 12 months is completely reasonable. Some would say that's actually too long. You know, you could write this as like at most 12 months. You know, the thing about like not wanting to, you know, for lack of a better term, boot out like, you know, legacy maintainers and stuff is accurate, but there's ways to do that that doesn't like drop them down in status, right? You can have like an emeritus team, so they keep their organization membership. And if they've not been active in the project, generally speaking, for a long period of time, generally speaking, most of those people will not come back. And in the rare case that they do, it's trivial to go and re-give them the access that they had if that's what the project wants to do. So I don't think it should be terribly controversial to say, you know, these individuals who are no longer contributing for a long period of time no longer have write access. I think that's just good security practice. You know, especially you don't want to have to get into the analyzing, are they contributing to GitHub at all or just not to this project? Obviously, if they're not contributing to GitHub at all, then the risk also becomes, you know, that their account could be compromised. You know, the longer a period of time goes on that they're not using an account, arguably the more opportunity there is for that account to become compromised. And then if they have write access on these things, then they can do some damage, etc. So I think this is perfectly reasonable. If Ulysses, I mean, Ulysses is not here, but if he thinks it's too prescriptive, I don't know. I really don't think a year is prohibitive. And like I said, any other concerns about, you know, removing people from projects or whatever can be, I feel like those can be assuaged by good inclusive practices like the emeritus teams and things like that.
Plus one to all that, Chris. The one place where I've noticed there has been some sort of friction and pushback from projects in the past is when those kinds of rules are enforced by automation and not humans. So like getting on the emeritus document or something like that, that can be done in error. So like, I don't know how, you know, we want to phrase that, but just like having a person remove your access versus some automation saying, oh, well, you haven't done these XYZ things in the GitHub API, it's been 12 months, you're removed. The latter feels more mechanical. The former feels a little bit more like the open source spirit.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. The other thing I was going to mention was you can even like nobody has to know, like you could like to save, if you're worried about saving face, for example, on like a legacy maintainer, you don't have to, like if they're listed on like these are the project maintainers list or something, you don't even have to remove them from that necessarily or right away, right? You can just simply remove their write access because you're just concerned about the account being compromised or whatever. And again,
Sure.
if they come back later, you can always re-add their access. And then later on, you can remove them from whatever team list or something as needed. So I really want to decouple the security aspect from like the public perception
Totally.
PR
And
aspect.
the key word there is you, meaning like a person does it. And like I think if a person does it, then it's a conversation for two maintainers that know each other well enough to say, oops, I did that by accident, or I did it for these reasons, versus the person getting removed, discovering from some automation, and then the people who are there are like, oh, we didn't even know why that happened. Like that's usually where the feelings get hurt.
Right.
Cool. One more quick one before we head out the door. Actually, you know what? I won't do that right now. So just kind of a brief review, next steps. What I'm going to do is just put in some illustrative columns here. And you all can go create for your own columns, and I'll go follow the next steps on creating some issues. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you all think. I'll be pretty interactive in here too. Don't be afraid to put like a comment in that tags somebody and assigns things to them. You want folks to see what you're up to and see the comment. But I really appreciate your all's help with this and the support on the hierarchical stuff, and also just doing this sanity check of things that are there before we lock in for 2.0, which hopefully will not have as many changes on what the items are, but afterwards we'll have more additional changes to flesh it out more and make it a more helpful guide. Cool beans. Any other requests or thoughts, folks, before we adjourn for today?
No, thanks for your continued efforts on this, Brett. Appreciate it.
Big jumps.
I guess Rob, back on the CNA thing, Robin, are you going to email Pedro, or I forgot what we decided there.
No, yeah, I was gonna do that. I'll do that right after this meeting to see what's going on.
And if we don't hear back, then I'll pile on.
Sounds
Cool
good.
beans.
I'd give him the
Awesome.
benefit of the doubt. He might just be waiting on slow responses from MITRE.
Yeah, yeah.
Word. All righty, folks. Thanks again and happy Monday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Toodles.
Bye.